Good morning. My name is Ken Laberteaux. Today, with my co-authors Karim Hamza and Jean Chu, we will be presenting cost modeling of electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles through 2030. All three of us work as researchers for Toyota Motor North America, based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. While we work for a company that has strong interest in this topic, I will preface the talk by stating that this work should be seen as a scientific endeavor. Our models are in the public domain and draw heavily from other public domain material. This work contains no Toyota confidential materials. Full citations are available in our 2020 SAE World Congress paper. We also have in the public domain a spreadsheet showing all of our calculations. We will provide links for both near the end of our talk. This work describes the author's technical judgments, but are not the official position of either Toyota or AABC. To set the proper mind frame, I will start with two quotations. Yogi Berra said, "Prediction is hard, especially about the future." More to the point, Professor George Box said, "All models are wrong, but some are useful." We hope that you find our model useful. Our outline is as follows. We begin with an overview and our motivations. We then present our detailed total cost of ownership bottom-up model, which leads to our baseline results. We then describe our sensitivity analysis and then conclude. Let's begin this introductory overview section by giving a brief, generalized example of how our cost model works. Don't worry about the numbers this time. We will spell those out soon enough. This should give everyone a basic understanding of how our price model is built. Back in 2019, the manufacturer's suggested retail price of a sampling of available midsize sedans depended on each's powertrain, as shown here. However, there were also incentives available, which reduced the purchase price for some of the vehicles, and other costs and credits, including resale value of the vehicle, which will reduce the overall investment, as well as operating or running costs, which increase the amount of the investment. The resulting 5-year total cost of ownership, or TCO, made some plug-in vehicles competitive with internal combustion engine, or ICE, vehicles. The red dotted lines mark the TCO of the ICE vehicle. In the future, many people believe that plug-in vehicles will reduce their prices, but also, many expect at least some of the incentives to be reduced, or perhaps completely phased out. Together, these could make the total cost of ownership in the future difficult to predict. Added to this uncertainty are hidden incentives. For example, for a variety of business and regulatory reasons, some car manufacturers might sell a certain vehicle for a smaller profit, or possibly zero or negative profit. These business decisions are often held in strict confidence by the OEM. This would be one example of a hidden incentive. Further, there are a number of rapidly evolving technologies in some of these vehicles, each with perhaps a rapidly changing cost to the OEM. Thus, our cost model must include some uncertainties for future years. Again, this slide is just a brief demonstration of our approach. Now, my two co-authors, Karim Hamza and Jean Chu, will fill in the details. I will be back at the end to summarize. Karim, take it away.
We start our total cost of ownership model with the major powertrain elements. First, let's consider the cost of the battery. There is a wide range of predictions for the future and even from 2018. However, if we back up to 2016, we find a price that several models have settled on. That is $273 per kilowatt hour. Many well-respected modelers have agreed that $100 per kilowatt hour is likely the floor for current lithium-ion battery technologies for vehicles. with further price reductions coming from further evolutions of technology that are, at least in 2020, not roadworthy yet. Given Anderman's estimated time to transition from proven roadworthy to mass market production, we conclude that sub $100 price point is most likely to occur, if ever, no earlier than 2030. This graph shows our 2016 price estimate and Anderman's 108 price prediction for 2030, with a constant percentage per year cost reduction for BEV battery packs. We also assume a 25% markup for PHEV packs, which are usually higher power per kilowatt hour. This is the battery pack price model we use in what follows. Two quick notes bear reminding. First, not all pack kilowatt hours are generally available for driving, and second, the EPA measures energy efficiency for plug-in vehicles on the number of driven miles versus the energy from the grid, not from the battery. We note that some modeling efforts may overlook these important points. For the other main powertrain components, our models follow this basic first-order cost model for each of the major subsystems. This approach is used by many modelers, including NREL, Carnegie Mellon University, the ICCT, as well as the National Academy of Science. But of course, the coefficients alpha 0 and alpha 1 differ from one model to model. We mostly adopt NREL's model and note that this and other models can be traced back to Argonne's early work from the early 2000s. We consider the engine subsystem as mature technology and thus assume its per unit costs will not change much in the future. We similarly treat transmission technology as mature with no modeled per unit price reduction. However, we do model different costs for the single-speed reducer types of transmission used for many battery electric vehicles, from the multi-speed reducers or the continuously variable transmission used for most other powertrains. Much to our surprise, we found the cost models for the motor subsystem to be less credible with inconsistent values, and the lack of real-world validation over the past 2 decades. This spaghetti image on the right is our attempt to map the interdependence of the references on the left. In the end, we made our own model, which is detailed in our public domain spreadsheet. That said, we are very open, even eager, to have further dialogue on this issue. If we find other models that are better than ours, we will update our cost estimates accordingly. Okay, all of this leads up to our baseline powertrain result, showing both our 2018 case as well as our 2030 case. Comparing the two, it is clear our model is projecting a major cost reduction in batteries in the future, signified by the green parts of the bars. Let's now consider the non-powertrain costs. For the other vehicle direct costs, we used estimates and methods that are also used by UBS and ICCT and scale these costs for larger vehicles. We also include indirect costs based on a conventional internal combustion engine vehicle. We expect that by 2030, it is unlikely that many of the OEMs will consider plug-in technology to be particularly novel. As such, we assume that in the future, this indirect cost fraction holds constant for all powertrains. Now we show our total purchase cost model for a conventional internal combustion engine vehicle, a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle with 50 miles range, and battery electric vehicles with 150, 200, and 250 mile ranges. Starting with the non-powertrain costs, then adding in the non-battery powertrain costs, and then the battery costs. Next, we add everything else that goes into the purchase. And here is our 2030 baseline scenario estimate. Clearly, total acquisition costs for various plug-in vehicles in 2030 shrink considerably and will come close to, but not quite, catch the acquisition cost of conventional vehicles.
Thanks, Karim. I'm Jing Chu. We next estimate running costs, including fuel, maintenance, insurance, and other costs. One of the other costs is the BEV replacement cost. This is the cost of using a second vehicle to use on days when a range-limited BEV cannot complete all the expected trips of a particular day. BEVs rarely are found in a single vehicle households. As such, we assume that the BEV replacement cost is simply the per mile depreciation cost, which is roughly 58 cents per mile of the second household vehicle, and only on days when needed. Note that single vehicle BEV households will likely to have a higher replacement vehicle cost, with options like taxi or car rentals, but we use this lower 58 cents per mile value throughout our model. We also model a 20-mile safety buffer for range anxiety. Note though, as BEV or electric range increases, this replacement cost shrinks considerably. For the sake of time, we just present this other cost without further explanation. Here you can find our estimates for fuel, maintenance, registration, and insurance. Now we provide our baseline results. Here are the estimated purchase costs minus the 5-year resale value and the fuel prices, as well as the BEV replacement costs. And finally, we add the registration, insurance, and maintenance costs. This brings us to our main result, the total cost of ownership of these varying vehicles. As you can see, shorter range BEVs, which are cheaper to acquire compared to longer range BEVs, actually end up costing about the same when you consider the added miles put on the household second car. PHEV avoids those costs and actually perform very well in this TCO comparison. Compared to an ICE, the PHEV has a higher initial price but considerably lower fuel cost over the 5-year window. At the beginning of this presentation, we mentioned that any cost prediction model must include uncertainties. Now we will consider the potential impact of these uncertainties using sensitivity analysis. First, let's consider if our cost reductions of batteries and motors are too conservative. So let's consider an additional 20% reduction of our baseline battery and motor costs. This will put our BEV battery costs at $88 per kilowatt hour. Even so, neither PHEVs or BEVs would cost less to acquire than an ICE, with shorter range BEVs closest. That said, the difference is often just a few $1,000s, perhaps less than an upgrade package that includes something like fancy, electronically controlled leather seats. If we instead consider the TCO under this lower cost assumption, the 50-mile all-electric range plug-in hybrid is nearly the same as the ICE, while BEV remains higher. This is primarily due to the added cost associated with BEV replacement vehicles, shown by the red portion of the bars. We should note that even if we remove the BEV replacement vehicle cost, which we strongly believe leads to a non-meaningful comparison, the BEVs still don't have a lower TCO than the ICE in most cases, although it becomes very, very close. We are nearly done. As our last point, we point out that TCO depends on the driving pattern. This result is based on a typical driving pattern for California. However, if your driving pattern is much more urban than the norm, as are these Californians with the most urban driving patterns, you can often get away with a smaller range BEV with essentially no BEV replacement costs. Note the lack of the red BEV replacement costs on these more urban BEVs. In fact, you could likely drive nearly all electric with a much smaller battery PHEV. You can see this by looking for the nearly non-existent black section of the PHEV bar, which are the gas costs. If, however, you are on the opposite side and do primarily long-distance highway driving similar to the least urban Californian drivers, then unsurprisingly, range-limited BEVs become less ideal. PHEVs, however, really shine this place, actually outperforming an ICE in total cost of ownership. Now let's go back to Ken to do the summary.
Thanks, Gene. Okay, let me summarize our presentation. We have presented a bottom-up cost model for internal combustion engine, hybrid electric vehicle, plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, and battery electric vehicles, considering both the acquisition cost and the 5-year total cost of ownership. We use only public data sources and provide a public detailed spreadsheet showing all calculation details. We observe that much uncertainty exists, but our model shows that the 5-year total cost of ownership in 2030 for plug-in vehicles remains higher than for an internal combustion engine vehicle. But a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle comes very close. For the purchase costs alone, we do not project any plug-in vehicle to reach parity with ICEs by 2030. But as they say, your mileage may vary, especially if you drive a pattern that is notably more urban or less urban than the typical Californian. This concludes our talk. To learn more, please see our paper referenced here, as well as our detailed calculation spreadsheet. This spreadsheet shows all of the details that you've seen in this presentation. Of course, please feel encouraged to contact us using our email addresses shown here. Thank you very much.